it gets overwhelming and there's a lot of stuff to think about. So what I'm trying to say is you need to have a way to separate sort of noise and figure out what to focus on. And when you're choosing what to focus on, even there's like, NFTs, DeFi, layer 2, zero knowledge, security, auditing, cross-chain, interoperability, so many different topics.
Hi, everyone. It's Jordan from the NEWFORUM team. NEWFORUM is the community podcast that invites purpose-driven visionaries, creators, and investors to spark accessible conversations on the topics of crypto, the metaverse, NFTs, and everything Web3. On today's episode, NEWFORUM is very happy to have Haardik, co-founder of EarnWeb3, to discuss his journey in the space, the importance of education, as well as the vision behind the creation of EarnWeb3. So Haardik, welcome to the episode.
Thank you. Great to be here.
So first question would be, how did you get into Web3 and when?
I got into it, I think like first time I did Bitcoin transaction was in 2014, but I wouldn't say I really got into it back then. I think I started actually digging deep around 2017, learned about Ethereum, was fascinated by the entire concept of the world computer that Vitalik was talking about. It blew my mind and just kept digging deeper and deeper and deeper. Got to deep, like spent years in the decentralized ID rabbit hole. Did a lot of open source work there, moved on to doing some protocol level engineering. And then last year, started EarnWeb3. So it's been about I think like 5-year serious journey, but first interaction in 2014.
So you were a student really when you discovered everything, right? Because you say 5 years ago. I mean, I'm not going to ask you directly for your age, but I would assume that back then you were probably like studying.
Yeah, I was in university doing undergrad.
What was really the trigger that led to the creation of EarnWeb3? Obviously, you started exploring the crypto rabbit hole. And so, yeah, what was the real trigger behind the creation?
Yeah, I mean, the real trigger was it wasn't designed to be a startup. It wasn't designed to be a company. It started off really as a way to kind of just help out a few friends of mine, because I wasn't really in the education space. I was chilling. I was doing my protocol engineering work. I used to work at Ceramic Network at that time. And a few friends of mine, like people who've been in Web2 for a long, long time, they wanted to get into the space and they didn't sort of find anything that like any resources that made them happy or that they thought they actually understood what they were trying to learn. So they just reached out asking for a few resources, and I didn't know what the beginner education space looked like in Web3 at the time. So I started Googling as well, spoke to a few people, yada, yada, yada. Didn't end up with anything I was particularly happy with either. So just had a few extra days, wrote some content, put together a quick little website. I was just like, okay, if we're going to help these 5 people, let's just put it on the internet and, public good. Before you know it, we had like 8,000 people something in like the first month, and they were wanting more advanced content, like get even deeper, teach me about this, teach me about that. And then it just kind of grew. We kept adding more content, kept getting more users, got to a point where I was spending more time on EarnWeb3 than like my actual job, and it wasn't fair to anybody to be doing that. So had to figure out a way to sustain it. That's when we kind of like started thinking about, okay, like how do we transition to like something that's can self-sustain, and figured that out, went that route, and then we quit our jobs and now on it full time.
If we take a step back then, so what are the current milestones? So you said it was created last year. So when, like, was it during in the middle of the bull run, at the beginning? What would you say are the specific, like the biggest milestones up to this point?
Yeah, I would say it was definitely not really in the bull run. When I say last year, it's a bit weird because it's actually like Christmas last year. So like maybe like 1 week of 2021. But then we actually kind of like came out publicly in January this year. So maybe like there was maybe like a month more of steam left in the market before everything crashed. But yeah, the bear market turned out pretty well for us. More and more people were sort of trying to upskill themselves instead of investing into, DeFi or NFTs or stuff anymore. So they were trying to learn about this stuff more. We got an influx of users around like May, June, sort of the peak of the bear market, and there was a lot of people coming in at that time. Since then, we kind of like, I think now we're at close to like 60,000 students actively taking our courses right now, and we're just growing. We have a bunch of partnerships now and launching new features, and yeah, we restarted our YouTube channel, things like that.
Yeah, there's one quote that I really love. Like, could you elaborate a bit more on when you go on the website? Is our goal is to onboard Web3 devs until Web3 is no longer called Web3. So, what are your thoughts on, in general, the term Web3, which is obviously a good marketing term for like people outside of Web3 or crypto?
Yeah, I think while I like this whole idea of like, okay, Web 1, Web 2, Web 3, right? It's a good way to explain people what we're talking about. You have to realize that before blockchain and crypto were a thing, we never really, or at least the mainstream never really referred to companies like Google or Facebook or whatever as, oh, these are Web 2 companies, right? It was just like, okay, these are like internet companies at most, or like software companies or whatever. And particularly saying that, okay, this is a Web 2 company, this is a Web 3 company, seems kind of weird to me right now. It just feels like we're just not at that stage of adoption yet. We're just too early right now. So I think the goal with Learn Web3, that quote, all it really means is we want to get a lot of people into the space to the point where like it just becomes so ubiquitous, it becomes so common that it's just like, it's a software company. It doesn't matter if you're using blockchain tech or not. It's just software company.
All right. So, can you take us through, like, if you're a young or older developer and you want to explore the Web3 side of things? Like, obviously, on Learn Web3, there's different tracks or
Mhm.
progress tracks. So, could you explain, like, what's the process? Like, if I'm really a newcomer, I'm interested in learning, what should I do? What are the different steps?
Yeah, so assuming you have absolutely zero knowledge of what Web3 is, or you don't know what MetaMask is, you don't know what a smart contract is and things like that. There's 4 core tracks that follow like freshman, sophomore, junior, and senior, kind of like a university program. So you start off at freshman. It's kind of like the intro, what is a wallet? What is a contract? What does Web3 even mean? Some very, very basics that we help you set up a wallet, build your first little D app on Ethereum, really straightforward stuff. Then as you keep digging deeper and deeper, sophomore is kind of where we take things up a notch in terms of smart contract development. So we explore like the main categories. You build like a Uniswap clone, you build a on-chain DAO, you build NFT collections, all ICOs, build the main sort of categories and themes that are prevalent today. And you also learn a little bit about like the theory behind how these chains work, like what is proof of work, how does it actually work, right? We hear this term thrown around, but not a lot of people understand how proof of work actually works. So things like that, and why is gas important? How does it contribute to security? Do all of that. Then in junior, kind of start digging into the ecosystem tooling a little bit. So moving beyond doing everything from scratch and writing your own contracts and everything, sort of looking at the landscape of tooling that makes developer lives easier. So things like Chainlink, the Graph, IPFS, Ceramic, ENS domains, all of these things that you can plug and play with, and it just makes things easier, just makes things faster to develop. And then senior is a little bit more focused on a couple of advanced topics and then a lot of security. So things like MEV and flashbots and sort of Merkle trees, how they work, and how do you take a flash loan from Aave, things like that. And then a lot of security stuff, so like the reentrancy attacks, tx.origin attacks, yada yada yada. Those are like the 4 tracks. We'd say anybody who's kind of like wants to start with zero knowledge and wants to get to a point where they can confidently at least start building on Ethereum, those 4 tracks are structured in a way where you follow them in order and you'll get there. And then we have kind of like growth tracks, which focus on more niche topics that aren't like 100% required knowledge for everybody, but depending on where you want to go, you probably want to learn about like some things there. So like we'll have like layer 2 tracks over there with some other layer ones like Flow for NFTs and like high performance NFT trading apps over there. Then we have things coming out around like ZK EVMs and cross-chain networks and building bridges, things like that will be launching soon.
So obviously a very important part of learning is being part of a community, feeling supported. So can you describe like how the community works within Learn Web3? Like going back to the example of I'm a new developer, I want to learn. What are the different things that I could be doing? And also what do you provide to these newcomers in general?
So the first time you sign up on the website, it kind of takes you through an onboarding flow, where the website is kind of where you see all these courses, right? It's self-paced and you do all the tests and assignments and everything on the website. But apart from that, as part of the onboarding flow, we'll sort of get you set up on the Discord as well, which is where most of the community activity happens right now. Discord's close to, I think, 40,000 people right now, and it's just always active. There's always something going on. We have multiple weekly events. We have a couple of working groups who are running community-led efforts. And then if you have any doubts, if you have any questions, that's the place you ask and get help. That's the place you form teams to join hackathons. And, you know, it's just a fun place to be. It's just really chill. I spend at least an hour a day, even now, on the Discord, just talking to people. It's just always something going on over there. And it's good to sort of have people who are on a similar journey as you on this learning path. Because if you learn alone, you can maybe move, you know, that quote, right? If you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, go together. I think we see that you can maybe buzz through the courses a little bit by yourself, but if you're with this community, you'll inevitably end up in hackathons. You'll inevitably be building projects. You'll make friends. You'll join events and learn much faster because you cannot keep up with everything the way 10 people combined can keep up with everything.
So is on the Twitter of Learn Web3, there's actually a lot of mentions on Earn Web3 DAO. Could you elaborate on what that is exactly? Is it related to the community, to the learning aspect? Is it to motivate newcomers? Like, what is it all about?
So EarnWeb3 just launched yesterday. Well, it's not technically even launched yet, but we just had the sort of announcement for it yesterday, I guess. Massive hype thing. We've been working on it for a while. I think early access starts close to end of October, and then public launch is scheduled for kind of like mid-November right now. But basically the idea is we're talking to the community, right? And one of the core things we realized is, first of all, there's actually a couple of things. From a student's perspective, first of all, there's so much going on in Web3. Imagine you're a newcomer and you join this sort of learning community, and there's people over there talking about, oh, Binance $600 million hack, oh, Mango $100 million hack, oh, EF Lever Vault millions dollars hack, oh, this contract just launched, Rick and Morty creators launching an NFT collection. You know, there's so much going on. It's so hard to keep up, and you're still here just trying to understand what the fuck is pragma solidity, right? It gets overwhelming, and there's a lot of stuff to think about. So what I'm trying to say is you need to have a way to separate sort of noise and figure out what to focus on. And when you're choosing what to focus on, even there's like, you know, NFTs, DeFi, layer 2, zero knowledge, security, auditing, cross-chain, interoperability, so many different topics. And people are like, okay, so Learn Web3, right now we have 6 courses. We have like 5-10 more coming out very shortly. How do we decide what to focus on? And we see people starting a course kind of halfway through, they hear about this other cool thing that's going on in the market and they switch, right? They're like, okay, we'll go there. And then 2 weeks later, they'll go there. So what I'm trying to say is there needs to be a way to kind of incentivize these people, incentivize these students to learn and focus on one thing at a time, because that is the way you learn. You can spend 5 years jumping between a bunch of things, or you can spend 6 months getting really good at one thing, and you'll be better off than the person who spent 5 years jumping across a bunch of things. So we needed to have a way to kind of like give people a way to apply that knowledge. get really good at something, and then apply that knowledge, because not everybody is a startup founder. Not everybody is going to get a full-time job after like a few months of going through courses. And some people are still in school, right? Some people have other responsibilities. Not everybody's moving full-time just because they went through a few courses. How do they start contributing to these ecosystems? That's where kind of EarnWeb3 comes in, where we're partnering with sort of our protocols and companies and people we work with to offer low barrier entry points to these students who've taken the courses, and they can apply their knowledge, build on various ecosystems, build proof of concepts, contribute open source, do a variety of different things, and get paid for doing that, in contrast to sort of just not knowing where to apply these skills and then just jumping between 100 different things, because there's always something more attractive out there.
So, I mean, you already partially answered the question, but so what are your general plans during the bear market? And also, do you consider the fact that there's like many, you could say, copycats? Is that a good or a bad thing? Is that a gauge to your success that since it's working so well, you've had copycats? So what are your general thoughts on the bear market and the fact that there's a lot of, copycats basically?
Yeah, I mean, no financial advice. I think bear markets come and go. Will probably be here another year or so. It doesn't really matter. It doesn't really matter in the space we're in, because it's just a build market. It's not a bear market. It's just a build market, and we see people coming in. They're more excited to build. We see a lot of people in the community actually who used to be traders. Everything from people who are like day trading with 6 monitors on the screen to people who are just buying random shit coins on BSC. All sorts of people who just like gave up on all of that in the bear market and just coming and like now they're learning how to build and doing their own stuff. And in the bull market, there's kind of the opposite. In the bull market, you attract entirely newcomers, people who haven't really heard about the space, and they get attracted through, Bitcoin's 100K. And they come in, and then if they're developers, they usually tend to get into technicals, and you attract those sort of people. In bear markets, you attract people who are already there, but weren't necessarily building. So I don't think in the education space it really matters a whole lot, to be honest. We don't have a token or anything like that, so we don't really care about market movements so much. As for kind of competition, I read somewhere that I forgot who said this, but I think startups worry too much about competition. I think competition's generally a good thing. It brings the best out of everybody involved, but at the same time, you shouldn't spend too much time worrying about competition, because the more time you spend worrying about competition, the less time you spend working on product and thinking about sort of strategy and everything. So we'd rather spend time on product, and we don't really care if there's copycats or I mean, there's a few projects we think are genuine competitors, but there's a few projects we think they're just, I don't know, we're not too worried about them. I won't take any names, but it's at the end of the day, I think it's more important to focus on our own product and our own shipping speed, and things like that, compared to sort of what they're up to.
And you obviously, I think you're very right to mention that we're in a market of builders. And I think there's no better example actually than Gitcoin, who has really been empowering a lot of projects without really knowing it. I think a lot of crypto novice or newcomers don't really realize that Gitcoin is supporting a lot of really good projects. So I was wondering, what role has Gitcoin played in the development of EarnWeb3 in general?
Yeah, no, Gitcoin is absolutely amazing. They kind of like the grants programs there. We were part of the last 3 grant rounds that Gitcoin held. We backed out. Now we won't be joining the next one because we raised money since then, and we are not eligible, and we don't need it anymore. But in the first few rounds, when we didn't have any money, Gitcoin grant sort of helped us get that initial, it wasn't like $1 million. It was like a few $1,000s, but it really helped us out in the early days, just doing little things, rewarding the community in ways, or spending on things we actually needed to spend on, even just like software infrastructure or like services we were using. But I think in the early days, if it wasn't for Gitcoin, it would have been sort of much harder to figure out ways to move to EarnWeb3 full time, because me and my co-founder, we both kind of recently graduated from university. So it's not like we have hundreds of thousands of dollars in savings or anything like that. We don't have like a huge safety net to fall back on. So when we have to make the decision to like quit our full-time jobs and move into this, with like sort of no income happening, nothing happening, and all payments at the time were made out of pocket, it was Gitcoin helped us a lot and sort of at least, okay, we're fine not taking salary for us, but at least we're not spending thousands on infrastructure and everything for Learn Web3. At least that Gitcoin can help us with. And that was very, very crucial, I think, in those days.
And what do you think in general in terms of like Gitcoin? I'll call it the virtuous circle. Like it sometimes seems like Gitcoin is supporting a lot of projects. And how do you see it the other way around? Like how can you or other big projects kind of support Gitcoin back? Is it through awareness, education, or just once you grow even more, remembering down the line that you were there partially because of Gitcoin? So how do you see it not only for Learn Web3, but even for other projects? Like should more crypto beginners be aware of Gitcoin, or is it doing its role really well as it is?
I think Gitcoin's awareness has gone up a lot recently. Like looking back at it from the last couple of years to like this year, it's been exponential growth, which is amazing on its own. Other than that, as for Learn Web3, the way we kind of contribute is I don't know if you've heard about Radical drips. So Radical has a stripping system where you can like donate part of your own grants to other projects. So Learn Web3's grants page, we donate a percentage of our grants out to like I think like 5 other projects, I believe. So any grants we get from Gitcoin, part of it just goes back to other projects through drips, which is pretty cool. Other than that, I think raising awareness is surely one thing about the grants program that we kind of do. We talk about it in like Twitter spaces. We've had countless conversations on Discord with folks asking about Gitcoin and Gitcoin grants, and I always try to green pill them a little bit. And finally, I think like Gitcoin has some kind of education programs as well with like Kernel 0x, and we at Learn Web3, we're huge fans of Kernel 0x. So if anybody, we get a lot of questions, right, about like, do you have any non-tech resources, or is Learn Web3 ever going to do non-developer focused crypto education? Or like, go to Kernel 0x. They're great. Gitcoin's great. Go join Kernel 0x. They're amazing. And we just, I mean, hopefully a bunch of people have gone there through our recommendation, but we've definitely tried to send a lot of people their way, I guess.
What are like you would say the biggest kind of hurdles or obstacles that Learn Web3 has not only faced but still needs to face in the bear market, in the past, and in the future in general?
Yeah, I don't think the market is relevant, but I think right now the problem is content. The problem is we have a lot of backlog, we have a lot of content we need to create, and content creation generally, there are certain topics that are easier to create content for compared to others, obviously, right? It's much easier to sort of teach. I don't know, if you have a basic understanding of Ethereum, it's much easier to talk about like some regular quote unquote like side chain kind of thing like Polygon, compared to talking about something like Aztec Network or Starkware or something like that. So we have a lot of content challenges, primarily that it takes a lot of R&D on our side, because like our engineers, like we're not omnipotent, so we don't know everything already magically. So sometimes when we're creating content, we need to go learn things ourselves before we can teach it to others, right? And scaling that process is a challenge. We're still figuring out. We've tried things, we've learned from mistakes in the past, but I don't think we're at the point where we can say we've fully solved that problem yet. Like it can take weeks, if not months, to sometimes produce a course, a well-structured course that we'd consider good quality on certain complicated topics. And we need to figure out ways like how do we effectively do that as we keep growing.
How do students give feedback, or what is the loop in terms of like feedback?
Feedback is mostly through community things. So right now we get feedback primarily on Discord. There is a dedicated feedback channel over there, so people post stuff over there. All the content itself is also open source. So if it's just like, we get a lot of people contributing just on GitHub, they create pull requests and things like that. So you have a bunch of contributors who helped us with the content itself, but still we typically, like, at least right now, we maintain, like, at least the initial production of the content is done by the core team, and we kind of like have like a little bit of an editorial role there to sort of maintain a quality standard, you can say.
Slightly different topic, but you wrote in your Twitter bio that you were a decentralized identifier maxi. So I was actually wondering, could you a bit elaborate on this? First of all, remind the audience very briefly what is a decentralized identifier, and more specifically, what are you excited about in terms of like society, brands, or even individuals? Like, why are you a maxi on this specific topic?
Yeah, I think it should say SSI maxi, but I think people don't know what SSI means. It's not really the decentralized identifier I'm particularly a huge fan of, but SSI, for people who don't know, it's this concept that individuals should own their identity. And identity, I think commonly people, when you say the word identity, think of things like, passport, driver's license, things like that. But identity is so much more than that. Your Instagram posts are your identity, your Twitter tweets are your identity, your emails are your identity. All data that sort of correlates to you in some way or the other, your financial transactions are your identity. All of this stuff builds up to form your identity. And these are things that big corporations, Google, Facebook, etc., they know you better than you do, because they have computers that have access to all of this information, and your brain can only handle so much at one time. But SSI generally is just the idea that folks should have control over their identity, and they should be able to choose what data they share with whom, where it's going, maybe have a data marketplace. I don't know, I'm not too much into that, but it's possible to get money for your selling your data if you really want to. But I think generally, overall, it just comes down to the fact that it enables ownership and security and sort of digital control over your lives, over your identity, that hasn't been there. And there have been efforts specifically made to not give you that control over the last couple of decades. And SSI, with with these decentralized identifiers and a few other technologies, are working towards sort of giving you back that control. What I'm most excited about, I spent a couple of years exploring decentralized identity solutions in sort of developing countries like Africa, parts of Africa, and sort of Southeast Asia. Over there, there's this problem of kind of, people don't have access to basic services because of a lack of documents, because of a lack of identity. There's a lot of people in those kind of countries who, they're born, they don't get a birth certificate. People have bigger problems to worry about than going and getting a birth certificate for their newly born child. You don't get a birth certificate, you don't get any form of identity. You grow up, you become an adult, and wow, you can't create a bank account. You can't get any government benefits. You don't have healthcare benefits. You don't have anything because you don't have any identity. And it's a big problem. It causes a lot of like informal work. Depending on whose perspective you're looking from, there's a lot of issues. Like from the government side, there's a lot of issues. From the international political side, there's a lot of issues. From the individual side, there's a lot of issues when you're stuck in a situation like that. And SSI has the potential to kind of like fix that and provide access to these people to things they haven't had access to before in a simpler way. Because it's not just the fact they don't have identity, it's also that these countries tend to have high levels of corruption, and government offices work on bribes. So it's SSI can sort of prevent and solve those things, or at least make it much easier for these people to gain access to services like that. And I think SSI is already being adopted in more developed areas in the world. People just don't know about it because it's one of the few technologies that is Web3, but people don't call it Web3. So it's actually there already in more places than you think. And it's super cool tech, but I just want to see it get incorporated into more developing countries though.
Yeah, no, 100% agree with you. Like, thank you so much for these great examples. I think it ties back to like the notion of education. Obviously, you have great examples of like if you're like in Africa, obviously there would be a strong need if you don't have an identity. But if you go back to someone like in Europe, first of all, I think there's the notion of educating people that are not in Web3 of why you would need, first of all, a decentralized identity. And you could almost argue, if you're like, if I'm playing devil's advocate, that you don't mind or you don't realize the importance of giving away your data, for example, to big companies like Google, because you are actually getting a lot in exchange. You know, a lot of people are dependent on, you know, Google Maps, Gmail. So it's obviously finding the balance. So going back to learn Web3, but also this general topic, how important do you think it is to educate, I guess, the rest of the world on Web3 topics more broadly, not just from a developer standpoint? And how do we proceed? Because it's obviously something that I think the space has been struggling with.
No, I think that's a great question. I think that especially when it comes to financial services, right? When you look at like more developing countries, it's prevalent. Okay, you need SSI because people don't have access to this. I stay in Canada, you know, you're in Europe, you know, credit cards work fine. 99% of the people in Canada have a credit card. Like literally, that's the number, 99.3% credit card penetration rate in Canada. Everything just works fine. You walk into a store, you tap it, and you're good to go. Countries like India, where I'm from, has less than 15% credit card penetration rate the last I checked. It's just not the same experience. Well, India now has UPI. We don't want to talk about that, but it's gotten more digital now, but still there's other countries like that which don't have digital payments, digital money. But financial services was one thing. There's also the problem of identity theft, which is prevalent in the US and Canada and has been growing over the last few years significantly. It's not slowing down. Identity theft is another thing that SSI aims to solve. Visa problems. Why does my sister, who's on a work visa in the US, need to fly to India to get a new visa stamped every few years when she needs a renewal? Why can't she leave the country? Because she won't be able to come back because visa processing times are 6 months. I can't leave Canada right now because my visa is being processed. If I leave, I can't come back. It's just like, it's annoying little issues that go beyond just like, you know, financial data or whatever, that SSI can solve by having sort of like secure online services that do this. But not digging into the rabbit hole too much, I think generally the apps that will end up in Web3 and being largely adopted by most people will not be applications that will be like, oh, Google is evil, go use us. I think that's good for like early adoption, but eventually there just need to be things that people are just generally attracted to, and they shouldn't think of it as Web2 versus Web3 thing. They should just think, okay, this is cool, and this is doing something that's simply not possible in Web2. Like Google can't do this without making money off ads or without collecting your data. And here's this killer app. It's great. It's got some sick features, and those features are only made possible if you kind of go against what kind of things Google and Facebook do. I don't know. I think education is one thing and raising awareness is one thing, and we should absolutely do that. But I think mainstream adoption will not come from that, because at the end of the day, I don't think people care enough about their own data and their own privacy outside of a small group of enthusiasts that they will just give up on those benefits, as you mentioned.
What are your thoughts on graphs in general? Like, it's been the talk in town. I don't know if you're familiar with social graphs, Web3 graphs. Do you have thoughts on this, or is this an area that you haven't really explored that much?
I think social graphs, they can be used for things other than social media. I think Vitalik and Gitcoin founder Kevin, they were talking recently about sort of quadratic funding with a factor of social relationships tied into it. So if there's a lot of money flowing in from people who are similar to each other, quote unquote, then it's valued less than a lot of money flowing in from a variety of people who are not related to each other in any way possible. So it's kind of like favoring diversity over sort of collectivism, smaller groups of people who may be donating large amounts of money. I think that's a very, very cool application of social graphs. If we can get to that point, that would be interesting to see. My digging deep into these ideas has been less philosophical and more sort of technical, like how should you build these social graphs? Should they be completely on chain through like Lens? Should they be kind of like off chain through like CyberConnect, like not centralized, but you know, not on a blockchain either, through something like CyberConnect? That's where I have some thoughts on, but I think generally the idea is cool and it can lead to some cool applications more than just social media.
And I guess the final question would really be like, I mean, you partially answered that once again, but it's like, what are you the most excited about really in the coming years? Not only for Learn Web3, but also like on a personal level, maybe something that's completely different from Learn Web3. It could be DeFi, NFTs, gaming, like yeah, Learn Web3 and you. And also, what would be your final kind of recommendation? So I guess it's a double question.
I mean, I will stand with the fact that apart from education and everything we're doing there, I think generally the biggest positive thing that Web3 can bring to the world is SSI. And if I wasn't working on Learn Web3, I'd still be working on some SSI related things at most likely at Ceramic Network. I just think there's massive possibilities, man. I don't know how many people know this. Canada government already using SSI, parts of US government already using SSI, India, parts of India using SSI, parts of Europe, parts of South Korea already using SSI. It's just going to grow, and it's just going to open up doors for so much more. And it's already being adopted by the mainstream because they don't know that it's Web3. They don't know it's blockchain. It's just software. But under the hood, it's absolutely amazing what's going on over there. I'm way more excited about SSI than any DeFi, NFT, gaming possibilities that are out there right now. As for recommendation, read some philosophy of science. I think people think philosophy, especially Gen Zers, they hear the word philosophy and it's like, oh, existential crisis. Why do we live? Why are we alive? That's not it. Philosophy is not about, I mean, part of it is about why are we alive, but there's other kinds of philosophy that are really cool. Philosophy of science and philosophy of mathematics and philosophy of computer science that are really, really cool and deal with some very interesting questions. And I think everybody should read a little bit of it. It can be boring, but read a little bit of it and it opens up your mind and impacts your life in ways you don't expect it to.
Yeah, definitely. I think critical thinking, like a very good point to end the episode. Well, I mean, thank you so much, Haardik, for being part of today's forum. Where can they find you, Haardik, in terms of socials, be it Twitter or website?
Mostly on Twitter, I guess, and I'm there on Discord, on the Learn Web3 Discord. I'm pretty active over there. DMs get very spammy on Discord, but you'll find me on the server most days, and Twitter is always there.
Yeah. What's your Twitter handle?
My Twitter handle is my name followed by 2 more Ks. So
perfect.
Haardik, but with 3 Ks total at the end.
Got it. And we'll put it anyways in the description. So once again, thank you again for being a part of today's forum. As for us, if you want to get more involved in our community, make sure to follow us on our social platforms. So Twitter, it's NEWFORUM_NCO. And you can also join our Discord community to connect with our community. So yeah, you'll find the links in the chat for Haardik and us. And thank you so much. Don't forget to share, like, and subscribe, and have a great day.